we're going to call to order our workshop for February 21st, 2023. Welcome, everybody. We'd like to declare a quorum of 6 members present, 1 absent. Brings us to item C, hearing the citizens. We have none. That will bring us to item D, D1, consideration and discussion related to setting a date and time for a management oversight workshop in the area of human resources. Mr. Martindale.
Thank you, Mr. White, board members. That's our second attempt at this. We sent you guys a number of different dates. The date where the most or the best we could come up with was 6 of 7 board members is Tuesday, April the 11th from 11 to 1 p.m. The only board member that's not available on that date is Dr. Payne. And in visiting with him, he had no objection with us moving forward without him. So unless there's objection, then my recommendation is we settle in on April the 11th for management oversight for human resources with 6 of 7. If we don't get it then, I'm fearful we'll have to, May is never timely for anything. And then we're looking at June, which summer begins to get rather difficult as well. 11 to 1. April the 11th, 11 to 1. Good? Thank you, Dr. Payne.
All right, that'll bring us to item D2, consideration and discussion regarding the comprehensive facilities condition assessment as conducted by VLK Architects. Mr. Martindale.
All right, thank you, Mr. Warwick. We have Melissa Fleming from VLK Architect joining us up front with Ms. Strauss, our Chief Financial Officer. Melissa and her crew started this process really, I guess, late September, early October. At the September board meeting, the board gave us approval to enter into arrangement for them to do a comprehensive facilities assessment for us. So she's going to kind of go through the process, the various components that you have sitting here in front of you, give us the big takeaways and the next steps as far as how we take this transition into a committee, and then how they work their way through possible projects for the next bond. So what you have at your place is a notebook of the different pieces of everything she's about to give you an overview on. We will have all of this or these various documents posted to our website probably before the close of this evening, so that the public can go look at these in detail, because there's lots and lots of information here that they have gathered for us throughout the course of the last number of months. So did I miss anything, Amy and Melissa, before I turn things over for you guys? All right, turn things over for them to kind of give us a take on the process and timeline and some of the big takeaways.
Perfect. Well, thank you. Good evening, board members and Mr. Martindale. Appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight to give you this update. As Mr. Martindale mentioned, I'm here tonight to give you
I put both.
You put both of them here, and we're trying. Okay, there we go. As you mentioned, I'm going to give you an update on the process and then the facility condition assessment and the next steps. So as he mentioned, we did start this process back in September. The board approved a partnership with VLK Architects to engage us in the long-range planning, facility planning process in September 20th. And from there, as you can see on the schedule in the shaded area, subsequently there have been many meetings. We had a initial planning meeting to kind of just discuss each of the steps we were going to take and outline the schedule for it. We had a visioning meeting and many meetings to kind of kick off these components I'm about to walk you through. But essentially it culminates in tonight's update, and then as we mentioned, I'll recap where we go from here. So in VLK Link, that is our process. It's our comprehensive process that takes you through a long-range facility planning effort. It's from the very beginning through the culmination of a potential bond program. Here you can see there's various components, and I want to walk you through all of those. But essentially, each of these build upon each other. Each of these are important in order to understand the district's vision as well as the community's expectations, and align those two into something that we can walk away from and have a comprehensive plan. Speaking of the long-range plan, it is a TEA requirement effective as of November 1st of 2021, and it's a lot more robust than it has been in the past. And so essentially what this means is that any capital improvement project needs to be a part of this plan moving forward. So in those, the TEA has aligned certain elements that need to be included in the plan. And those are identifying the existing and proposed instructional programs, looking at the age and condition of your buildings, which is facility assessments, a history of your completed capital improvements at facilities. And I won't read all of these to you, but then also educational specifications. And we'll go into a little bit deeper dive of what that is as well. But realizing there's a lot of parts and pieces to this, but all of it comes into this comprehensive package. So they also tell you that the process shall consider input from teachers, students, taxpayers, and other school district stakeholders. So seeing the agenda tonight, you're taking that next step by discussing and approving a potential charter for a committee made up of those stakeholders. The compliance is when that long-range plan is presented to you as a school board and then taken action on and then delivered to a design professional such as ourselves for these projects in the future. So again, it's outlining, here's the project, here's what's included and what was essentially decided upon by this committee, and then it comes to fruition. Let me back up really quickly. It does say that those plans expire after 5 years. So this is going to be a continual effort. So this will be your baseline, and then ideally the documents within are just updated to reflect changes within the district. So we like to say first we must curate. So our first step in this process is VLK curation, which is a way for us to study your philosophy of your expectations and your educational standards. And it also informs the educational specifications that I'll talk about again in a few slides. This meeting had participants with district administration, program directors, and even a few of you board members were able to participate in this. And essentially it came down to facilitating a discussion of the ideas of moving forward. Again, in the past, the district has been more growth driven. And so bond programs have been a need of responding to that. Right now we see College Station, the growth is not necessarily, it's slowing, it's stabilizing, and now's the time to potentially recreate and improve upon what's already here, and how do you want to grow for the future and establish that. So that meeting was ideally more so the discussion of moving forward and the ideas of that. So the next step is programming capacity analysis. So what we do is take your existing facilities and understand how they're being used. Again, over the evolution of a district, the facilities may not be, they may not have the same programs as when they were originally designed. You have 50-year-old buildings, they're supposed to last that long, but education transpires over that time. You have a lot more special programs, some small pull-out spaces, so it's really important to understand how you're using your facilities and what an accurate functional capacity is for each of those campuses. And that helps us align with the demographic update we received from your demographer last fall to align those and see how the growth or stabilization of that is affecting your campuses. Another item we do is technical design guidelines. And those are what we like to call more the non-negotiables. And those are more in your the physical facility standards. That has something more to do with what type of materiality to use, what type of building systems, building management control systems, roofing, and so forth. And so those just really, well, as we're working through those are helping define when we're looking at the facility condition assessment. When we look at those facilities, such as maybe an aging facility like Rock Prairie, that it may not have the flooring standard that has now been developed for College Station SD, that is a non-wax flooring that helps with the maintenance operations budgets and so forth. So this document is a way to essentially identify and document those district standards moving forward for more capital improvement projects. Okay, so the educational specifications. So this is another TEA requirement, and these are more of your design standards. These are looking at the adjacencies in a building. How much collaboration do you want? How does the facility support the teaching and learning goals of the district? It will be an evolving document because TEA requirements are continually evolving. And this also will evolve in the sense of any project that is brought forward in your long-range plan, the program requirements are indicated within this. So if you were to do a rebuild of a campus, that program is in here. If you did a classroom addition, the program for that specific project, and again, this is only for instructional facilities, that program is included in this document. As I mentioned, it is a TEA requirement, and so the new requirement essentially says that you have these for any new construction or major renovation project. And again, it's defining what were those spaces that needed to be included to meet the teaching and learning goals of the district. The educational specifications, as far as the elements that the TEA requires, goes a little bit further. It wants a lot of your, the school district's mission, vision, goals, pedagogy. Again, I mentioned the program requirements. So what type of facility is it, the grades served, potential enrollment, and then looking at even inclusive design goals as far as how are you serving every student that comes through College Station ISD. Another assessment we undertook was educational adequacy. And so this helps us also evaluate how well a school facility supports, again, the teaching and learning. So we've got the educational specifications for the goals of how we're doing it, but let's look at your existing facilities and how they're supporting that. So this document goes through site, it goes through athletic fields, it goes through classrooms, cafeteria. How are all of those spaces? How do they align with TEA standards? How do they align with those educational specifications? And even just your district's educational mission. So sample questions are the rooms the correct size? Again, that can be evaluated against TEA standards. Do classrooms have natural light? Is that something that's important to College Station ISD? So this is a really good indicator of when we're looking at facilities, how they compare against each other as well. So then the facilities condition assessment, the most probably robust portion of this. This is essentially we go and do a site walk of every single facility within the district. This is your instructional campuses. This is support facilities such as the central office we're sitting in tonight, a maintenance warehouse, transportation, and so forth. And we're looking at the existing condition of, what is there right now that we can physically observe. And then as we identify those items, we start to look at priorities. And again, because you're going to find in any district a lot of need, but these are starting to identify life cycle needs. So we try and prioritize those because again, this can become a living document in the sense of what might be a lower priority now might rise to a higher priority in the future, 5, 10 years down the road. So priority 1, we look at those as being kind of essentially your critical replacements, life expectancy of 0 to 2 years. Those are something, or even it affects the educational curriculum. Do you have to cancel school at a certain campus because your chiller failed or something to that effect? So Priority 1 is those critical replacements. A priority 2, again, you're looking a little bit further out, 3 to 5 years. And priority 3, even further out, 5 to 10 years. And a priority 4 would be something, let's start thinking about X, Y, or Z. Maybe it's a programmatic idea that, College Station ISD would like to provide in the future. Well, we're just not there yet, but we can start to track those items. And of course, we also have a priority M for a maintenance item, something that we might feel that we saw that could be addressed with maintenance funds or other funding sources, but not necessarily through a bond program. So a little bit deeper dive into this. The facility condition assessment, the purpose again was to observe and document the current physical condition. And ideally what we're identifying are the aging facilities, overcrowded facilities, inequities among campuses, and identifying those areas of growth and expanding programs. In order to do this, sometimes the best way to gather information, especially because when we visit a site, we may be there on a day that it's not raining, and so we didn't see the roof leak, or it's a beautiful day and we didn't feel the humidity of a space, something like that. But we put out these questionnaires and gave the opportunity to campus principals and program directors to respond to these. And it asked them a various amount of questions of, any maintenance concerns, talking about those hot and cold areas, storage issues, anything to that effect that helped us really understand from those who, live and work in those facilities to get their input for something that we might not have been able to observe on the single day and time that we visited those campuses. So here are just a few photos to share with you about the types of things we look at. I mentioned that facility assessments are on-site assessments. They're done with the team. We had our engineers, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing engineers. We had a roof assessment and building envelope. So we're looking at the building envelope here. You can see in some photos. Even stage curtains, we look at the condition of those and whether or not they have a fire tag. It's very involved as far as looking at site conditions, needed structural repairs, and just the age of finishes overall. The intermediate schools, again, the same thing. We look even at the flow through a reception area and the front entrance of a campus, making sure that can you identify the front entrance and where you're supposed to go in and flow through a building, serving lines, and even the condition of marker boards, just your instructional tools. Again, a few photos just from the middle schools we visited. Again, looking at library and even library furniture. Again, the finishes, ceilings. I mean, it's a thorough, everything that we can observe, we identify. And at the high schools, of course, they're robust. They have a lot of programs, but those are all looked at as well. So you look at the kitchens, you're looking at computer labs, storage. You can see here we usually can start to identify if a storage is a need based on what's going on in the room. But even the doors and hardware, and we're looking at that through that lens of even safety and security, and even the curbs here and so forth. Just looking at the durability of what's on each campus. And I mentioned the robust program, so that falls into fine arts and comparing those and looking at everything there, the athletic facilities and CTE. And we've got kitchens and locker rooms and weight rooms and so forth to look at and identify potential needs in those areas. And I mentioned, we didn't just look at instructional facilities, we looked at the district support facilities. So even in this building here, the central office, warehouse space within the district, and office space, the spaces that truly support the operations of such a district, a successful district. So while not an inclusive list, here's quite a few of the items that we identified. We've got life cycle replacements of roofs and mechanical HVAC systems. Site improvements. We noticed, some erosion of a lot of, we talked about a little bit the soil conditions here and things like that, where we got a lot of heaving and and so forth. So we identified those. Aging interior conditions such as Rock Prairie Elementary, one of the older elementaries that hasn't cycled through yet to have those updates. Equitable athletic facilities at both your middle schools and your high schools. Overcrowding that was obvious at College Station High School with having 12 classrooms and portables. The need for additional space for science labs with TEA requirements and so forth, indicating that we're just very tight in science at A&M Consolidated High School. And then a need for additional space for CTE and fine arts programs at both your middle schools and high schools. So what are the next steps? So tonight, the next on your agenda is a step in the right direction of discussing that charter for long-range facilities and bond planning committee. In the meantime, VLK Architects will be working with College Station ISD district administrators and program directors to really come up with some of the solutions to address these identified needs. Now, there's some simple ones versus complex. The simple ones are those one-for-one replacements. I need to replace a chiller, I need to replace a roof, things like that. The complex are solving some of those spatial issues that we may have seen, the overcrowding, the aging facilities, but working through those and bringing those then to that long-range facilities and bond planning committee to review and determine which appropriate solution in the projects in relation to the cost and the priority of need. We would even prioritize those projects as well through a consensus building process. So bring you back to that schedule again, but then we'll have a different shaded area that's the next steps. So with that charter for a long-range facilities and bond planning committee, if that's approved, they would work into a series of 6 meetings to go through this information and prioritize and come up with a consensus built plan to bring forward to the Board of Trustees. And with that, I'm glad to answer any questions.
So the first question I have is that, because at the very end you're talking about the, you said one of our needs was for programs, like our CTE programs and whatnot. Do you take into account like future, like, you know, we're going to be building the CTE center. Do you take those kinds of things into account?
We have had many discussions about those and how do we put this into a long-range plan? Yes.
Okay.
How do we plan for that and accommodate it? Yes.
Right. And is that, I guess that will be, once it's built, that's going to be on the next time that this has to happen. Huh, that'll be looked at as well. I'm just.
As far as being assessed, yeah.
Right.
Whenever you have another new facility built, then it would become part of another assessment.
Okay.
So legally, I know it's a 5-year TEA standard. How does that typically work for districts? Or do we do this now and then we're going to start again in 5 years, or in 3 years, 4 years? Kind of what's that process for TEA requirements?
Well, per TEA, they're saying 5 years it needs to be updated, but I think that's because they find that most districts are doing it more often than that, just based on need. They're coming back every 3, 4, 5 years. And your plan may be that now that you have what we're creating for you as a baseline, it may be documenting that you have no more need, but it's more so you're moving up the priorities. Like I said, on that facility condition assessment, what might be a priority 3 right now in 5 years is a priority 2 or priority 1. That still qualifies as a long-range plan, whether or not you have a bond program and you call a bond election or not.
Well, obviously, a lot of work's gone in already, but there'll be more work ahead. This is a huge thing here that you just gave us with only a little bit of kind of the overview of what it is. Can you maybe spend a few minutes giving a little bit more on how we could best use this, or the community could best use this?
The capacity summary?
Yes, or not just that page, the whole,
of everything?
The whole thing. I mean, yes, just the whole.
Sure. Well, I have my own version, but
I saw it.
I know what know we provided. So on the capacity study, that again was going back and evaluating how you use those campuses and identifying the functional capacity. And again, that's right sizing the facility for how many students can fit in the building and receive a quality education. So that's your threshold there. That's what you that's the amount of students that you're targeting as far as what the building can hold. And so the demographer looks at that also when they're giving you some of your updates. And usually, Amy, correct me if I'm wrong, the
We use,
105?
Yeah, 85 to 110. When
110.
we just look at what we consider optimal enrollment. So functional capacity is a little bit different because it's how it's the space used. So you'll see a little bit of difference in that relative to FC local and what's reported there. Not huge, but what you'll see differently is they may have determined a functional capacity more or less than what we would have utilized based on just what we thought the school was built for. Yeah. So, and let me mention this, Kimberly, I was about to mention, and I'll say it to the group because I know lots of folks, there will be folks that want to process and look at this. As I mentioned when we started, all of this is going to be online. It's obviously, you see how many pages it is, and that's double-sided for you, correct? So we'll have a landing page on our website that has each of these different components that you're looking at now, from the functional capacity. There's a side-by-side with the athletic facilities that you're looking at, Geraldine. Mm-hmm. There's the curation report.
Yes.
In the curation report meeting, if I may speak, there were 3 board members that were a part of that. In my mind, the curation component was almost like an aspirational conversation, right? And as you alluded to, Melissa, earlier, you spoke to, is we have always been in a keep up with the growth place as far as facilities for a very long time. I think as a district now, with that growth kind of stabilizing, the question becomes, what is our expectation? What is our desire? What is our vision for what we want our facilities to look at and our kids to have access to, not today, but we need to be thinking about what we want it to look like 10 years from now. What do we need to do now to prepare our high schools for when they're both 6A? And that type of thing. That's the type of vision that I think we have to challenge the committee with as we think about the future. And you mentioned CTE, Geraldine. We have the first phase, which I know we'll be bringing pricing to the board in the next month or two, and we'll get a groundbreaking on that. But where does phase 2 and 3 come into play? And you're going to have the same conversations for fine arts. You know, what does our community and our stakeholders want our facilities to look like 10 years from now for our students? If we're looking at right now, we're already behind, right? Which we are in many regards, I would think. So.
And Ms. Martindale, and kind of answered Kim's question. If I was to recommend to anybody, the curation report is where I would start, specifically pages 9 through 11. Because that again shows, before you read any other numbers, or you're going to go to your elementary school survey and see, oh yeah, that's what I thought. Again, looking at 10 years out, that curation tab, pages 9 through 11, that frames everything in our decision-making process. And I'm confident with committee as well.
This is a lot.
And I think for me also, the long-range decision-making process and the vision statement is going to be critical, because we've learned we don't know what's going to look like in 5 years. We don't know what it's going to look like next year, and being ready to make those decisions. So are we going page by page on tab 4?
I was going to say, well, so I would agree curation is where we started in the process, so that is a great document to start with for anyone looking at that and downloading it. But it's the aspirational message that we received of where does College Station ISD hope to go. Educational adequacy, again, that was the assessment that we did looking at TEA and educational specifications. And so there's a form in there for every instructional facility, and it receives a score. And so again, those are based on looking at those, essentially those requirements and information we receive from the districts.
And that's what I think is a comment on the Educational Adequacy Index, just the summary page. I think it goes back to things we were talking about with TRE. Look at the quality of students we produce. Look at the quality of education that is provided, but there's not a single positive score on that adequacy. So by TEA's estimation, we're behind, yet all the testing scores say we're ahead. So I think it shows what we can do with good talent and recruiting and retaining the right people in lieu of that. But I think it'll illuminate to people a lot when you look at the schools that we know anecdotally are a problem, but they don't pass the smell test. Here's a number that shows you the amplitude and allow the committee a chance to prioritize things objectively.
I don't know how much I want to repeat from the curation meeting. And we have a committee that's going to make these decisions. Kind of playing off your comments, Blaine, and I've said this to folks, and I think to even Melissa. I think of the districts that our students compete against, wherever, pick one, XYZ, right? And our faculty and staff and students do a wonderful job. Then I think, okay, how do we measure up collectively from a facility standpoint? I think there's room for improvement there. And so the question is, and I think for the committee as well and our stakeholders is that a conversation our community is ready to look at and consider?
I hope so. I mean, yeah, and I think so too. And I'm glad we're kind of having this discussion, feeling it out, because I do think it's a blend between, the needs that are showing up on the adequacy index, right? Like you said, none of them are positive, and some of the schools, as we would expect, some of the older ones are far negative, because we know we need to put some investments into those facilities. But also pairing that with what we did in curation, some of the future planning that we know we need to do as well. So I'm hoping that the committee will be looking at all those pieces, obviously.
And realizing that the educational adequacy is, it's still physical. It's not talking about the education that your students are receiving in those classrooms. I want to be very clear on that. In the lens of TEA, it's more about the spatial requirements and things like that. And then realizing that a positive score exceeds the standard. So positive isn't necessarily always a good thing on these either. You're just trying to hover around 0 or a fairly low negative number. But exceed means that you may have overbuilt something. You have which may equal overspending. But that might mean that you have like a high school gym size at an elementary school. That's exceeding a standard, and we wouldn't want to see that. So I'll just say caution to the scores in there of how those are derived, but looking at each individual one, you can see how those were scored, and it's just a -1, a 0, and a 1 for
It
each
seems
criteria.
like the newer schools are like that -3 to 5, and I think I like the amplitude that it gives. But I still think our teachers could be in a barn and still excel, given other school districts in town.
Absolutely.
I mean, in the state.
Yes.
And then this very last section, is it just really very specific needs for
What
each?
section is that? Because yours,
Well, they're not really
binder may
tagged.
not be in the same order as
Oh,
hers.
they're not really titled. It's just facility condition assessment
Okay.
draft.
So yes, so that's the draft right now that has all the line items we have found on our observation of every campus. Now, again, this doesn't have anything that would be one of those solutions I mentioned. We don't have the solutions in here yet, but these might be the solution. These might have the simple solutions like a roof replacement or replacing that chiller that I mentioned. But if you have a spatial item or needing to kind of reorganize or a full renovation of a campus, you wouldn't see that here. That's in one of those complex solutions that we will present to the committee.
That's for the committee to decide,
Yes,
to work through.
yes.
Okay.
And a lot of times you can start to see the need though through these line items of individual campuses and realize which campuses have the greatest need.
So that committee is going to have a lot of work to do. A whole lot of work. And figure out what our community can handle in terms of bonds to fix all of this, or the ones that are most prioritized. This is a lot of information. I knew it would be. This is a huge, I mean, it took you all a couple months, so.
It is a lot of
Should be a lot of
effort, and there's a lot of people who were involved who are not here. I do have Krista Thomas in the audience with me, but there's a lot of people involved in this, and it's a big effort. But realizing there's a lot of layers to it,
Right.
So it's not just there's not one single issue in the district type thing. You know, we're looking at it as comprehensive and letting each of these components build upon each other to come up with the right solutions for College Station ISD.
Yeah. I'm glad we did this. I know we have to. I mean, I didn't realize that it was a TEA mandated.
It wasn't till 21
Right.
November.
I have a lot of questions about that too, but I do, like, how did poor districts pay for this? But anyways, I'm glad that we did this. I think this is a good thing, and so we can see everything all at once. It's
I'm
huge.
curious, when's the last time we did anything to this extent? Y'all, you know?
You've done really thorough facility condition assessments in the past, and we've done those for you. And then, of course, your bond planning efforts have been great in the past, but having it documented in such a way with a lot of these components, this is new.
So also, what will be put in the front of yours is from the athletics perspective.
Yes.
You guys looked at square footage field houses, you counted lockers, you counted shower heads.
We looked
all
at it,
correct.
yeah, head to head, to look for those inequalities if they existed. And so we did look at those. We looked, as he mentioned, square footages of the facilities down to, the different types of rooms involved, locker rooms, locker counts, locker sizes, shower heads, and so forth. And whether it was, was a space in the field house or is it on the main campus and so forth. So there's a lot of data in there as far as those comparisons. And again, that will help inform future decisions as well.
And just to clarify, 'cause I think I know the answer to this, but we had a bond, just recently, and this just looks at the current state of the facilities. It doesn't take into account the already in motion
Yes.
improvements.
Yes, because we were involved in that and are aware, and we sat down and we've met with the district officials, facilities and maintenance, Amy and everyone. We did not put that into the current facilities condition assessment because it is already being addressed by the November 21 bond.
Okay, so for example, like the natatorium,
Yes.
it's going to show in here, or it's not even going to be mentioned because we've already dealt.
There's really nothing in there because it's all being taken care of from the November 21 bond.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just wanted to clarify that.
Good question.
So the same thing, there's projects in progress at Southwood Valley, Pebble Creek, A&M Consolidated High School. We took into consideration, even if it's not in progress right now, it was included in that bond program. And so it is not included in that condition assessment under the assumption that it's in progress. It's already funded.
That's a good question. I have hopefully my last one. I know you said this is kind of the hard part, but any insight on how you take a committee and look at some of these needs and try to make, like you said, the air conditioning, the roofs are easy, but some of the major changes or make a decision between an upgrade and a new facility, those types of recommendations. How are those worked through in general with
Sure.
the committee?
So we do evaluate on a facilities condition index as well. So when we're looking at the overall need and the cost of those repairs or replacements to a campus, we evaluate that against the replacement value of such campus. And so that gives us a score, essentially. But when we're looking at just some of these other projects, like you mentioned, there's the simple ones and there's the others, that's really kind of getting down into the weeds here very shortly for the committee and bringing together the programs and how that affects what the goals are of the district and how those projects, whether it's an addition, adding, CTE additions to, middle schools or something like that, how do we do that? Where does that go? Those type of conversations would be happening and putting together some estimates for that. It's a lot. I mean, it's a lot, but we're taking all of this and we're going to filter it into something that is consumable by the general public who are a part of that committee, who can make some informed, educated decisions. And they'll get to, I think, also get some tours of facilities to see them before they decide on what types of projects need to move forward.
Oh,
Did I
that's
answer
good.
your
No, I
question?
know, no, and I know you don't have all the answers yet. Yes, you answered it. That's great. And again, thanks for all the hard work. And obviously, we have some needs, so I'm glad this is in process.
I think it's important that we have this information for later when we go to the community and make requests, so that there's data, there's information, there's work to support those big asks. So timing, well, never mind, I'll cover that further.
Okay.
So with that, I mean, that's going to bring us to item 3A. I appreciate it, Melissa. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So like she mentioned, with item 3A, we have to do a process by TEA standards. So this is what brings us to 3A, and that is to bring and vote for a committee charter. Mr. Martindale.
What Mr. Horak said. No, BDB local allows the board to charter ad hoc advisory committees to make recommendations regarding needs of the district. The Long Range Facilities and Bond Planning Committee would review and prioritize information and ultimately recommend projects for potential bond to the Board of Trustees. That would be the purpose and the responsibilities of this particular committee. On the handout, and you should have this at your seat, it is linked into the agenda as well. You can kind of see the timeline. We're here now, February. VLK has delivered a lot of information and given us an overview of that. We're asking the charter of the Long Range Facility and Bond Planning Committee. If that were approved here shortly in March, we would come back on the 21st, the regular meeting, and ask board approval for proposed membership. That committee work would begin soon thereafter. I don't know if they'll get their first meeting in by the end of March. I think we have 6 meetings penciled in with the third-party facilitator that we would be using for this for the months of April and May. And ultimately, this committee would come back to the board by June with a recommended long-range facility plan, but also bond proposal. The board takes possession of that in June. They would have to act by mid-August to have anything out for the voters to consider in November. So that's kind of the timeline. So we're asking for the board to approve us chartering this committee so we can start work on this.
I have a question on the process. Wait, it says committee responsibilities. So you're going to recommend projects. Is it the committee or the board, or is it another committee?
The committee will come forward with a recommended
Priority?
projects and bond package for the board to consider.
Okay. So that, because I think my emphasis on prioritization, because it'd be nice to have, here's everything, what can we actually do in each tranche of a bond? And so they'll take into consideration that.
They'll have a long-range plan that does kind of map everything out, but there'll also be a recommendation for
Sequence.
projects for the first bond of which would be a part of the long-range facility.
And then just being that I'm new to this, the public finance thing, I think a lot of people I've spoken to, I like where you said typically funded with bonded indebtedness. Projects typically funded. Based on what I've seen, especially the TRE and the budget stuff, it's nearly impossible for any school in Texas to self-fund capital projects given the compensation the state affords. Is that, would you guys say that's true?
I would agree with that statement.
100%.
And a part of this process with the facilitator, of course, the facilities is a huge piece of it. Another piece of it is going through the financial piece and what our current debt situation is, what our tax rate can handle, or if it's this much, what impact would it have, or we can do this much with no impact. So they'll look at those scenarios as well. We don't run those numbers out now because we don't want the committee coming together with these numbers already in their head that we can only do this or that before they even begin to prioritize and consider different options to some of the situations. The demographer will come as well and give an update, so they have those numbers as well to consider. And a part of this process, I know Dr. Johnson, that's the facilitator. I mean, a part of this, one of the meetings is where she loads the committee up on a bus and takes them and lets them walk and look at everything so that they have firsthand knowledge of things. They're just not looking at pictures or looking at a notebook report, but takes them to the facilities as well.
And if you don't mind, I'll just say, I mean, in the past, it doesn't have to exactly be like this, but in the past, the committee would come to the board really with the list prioritized, and then it's kind of our decision more on the financial side of it to figure out where we're going to draw that line, right? How much we think we can actually go to our community for. Yep.
I move that we approve the charter for, I'm going to say it all right, the Long Range Facilities and Bond Planning Committee.
We have a motion by Ms. Nolan, a second by Mr. Decker. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries 7-0.
6.
6-0, thank you. So used to Thomas being here.